All right, so I've got some really great additions to spectrogram tilde and the package in general. I'm going to walk through them with you. Let's start with just a few changes. So in general, there's a bunch of optimizations under the hood, a lot of um, computational expense and memory management fixes, some bug fixes, but mostly performance fixes that are detailed in the changelog that come with the package. You can check it out in detail if you're interested. But I want to highlight a few really fun, cool new things. So with spectrogram, maybe not so fun, but useful. I now have a keyboard mapping to undoing and redoing actions, editing actions. So let's say that I've selected an area of this buffer and I want to delete it. Previously, we had this undo and redo. Now it's just mapped to the keyboard in the typical mappings that people are used to: Command Z, Command Shift Z, Control Z, Control Shift Z on Windows. So we can do a few of those, and let's delete that shape, and then I can Command Z 2 times or Shift Command Z and get back. So just some hotkeys. That's one thing. We also have a little bit more closely mirroring the behavior for groove tilde using the waveform tilde object, where you've selected a region and then you can independently zoom and pan without affecting that region, if you're using that for looping playback and so on. So the previous version, this selection was modified, clamped based on this view area, so you would actually change this. That's now independent of what you're looking at. So that's a nice little improvement. And then we have a render message, a series of render messages now. So we can already edit and modify the buffer in place based on different operations. I wanted a way to quickly, rather than then edit and then save the edit in the buffer that you're referencing, I wanted to be able to bounce or render portions of the buffer, selected portions of the buffer, to another buffer, which could have some fun implications. So let's say I've selected this region. Let's draw a few other shapes. Just draw a weird one. Okay. And then let me open this render messages subpatch. I'm in a new tab on the spectrogram tilde help patch render that details rendering. So let me open that up. And then I won't go through this in detail. You can read it closely, but we can render either the selection rectangle or the shapes or both. And we can render it so that it zooms to the selections, or that it renders the whole buffer. So let's do that. If I don't specify, if I just say render and then I specify the name of the destination buffer, which is right here, and nothing else, it's going to render all the selections, but it's going to zoom into the bounds of those selections. If I want the whole buffer, I can add the full argument after the message, after the destination buffer. I can just render the selection. In this case, it's the selection rectangle zoomed in. So the buffer is dynamically resized based on the message that you sent. If I want the whole thing, I've just now rendered only the selection to the whole buffer and the rest are silence. If I want the shapes only, it now just did the shapes and resized it accordingly. If I want the shapes but I want the full buffer, it'll do that. So we've got all these different options for quickly rendering to another buffer. So that's a nice, kind of useful thing if you're trying to extract something quickly, rather than having to edit the whole thing and then save it to a buffer and so on. So another thing, which is the biggest thing about the package, is a new object, spectrogram.player tilde. So this is a SF play tilde, groove tilde like MSP object that links to the spectrogram tilde object. Optionally, you can actually use it unlinked, and basically does what we were doing before, but with a little bit more horsepower. I was doing it before with groove tilde and then a spectrogram abstraction, spectral bandpass abstraction, which I still have as I still support here. But I wanted the ability to do more. I wanted to be able to show the playback, the playhead in the buffer. I wanted to be able to visualize what I'm playing, and most importantly, I wanted to do a dynamic spectral bandpass filter that followed the drawn shapes, not just the selection rectangle, but the drawn shapes. So let me first just show you. Right now, this has a bunch of attributes, and I won't go into all of them, but we've got loop, the loop at 3 modes, mirroring the groove tilde, off, on, and pendulum. We have speed, we have whether it does the filter, whether it applies the spectral bandpass filter or not, or just does playback of the buffer. Filter FFT size, you can apply gain to the playback, you can change the playback position in milliseconds and so on. And it displays, when loop is on, it displays loop points, which will typically map to the selection rectangle, but you can change that. And it'll display the filter when you actually employ the filter. So it's not that different but before, but it's very efficient, and it provides something that wasn't possible with an abstraction, where since these externals are linked and referencing the same information, this is dynamically able to do variable spectral bandpass in time and frequency. So let me play that real quick for you. Okay, so right now it's looping around there. Right, so let's just do. So this is all happening now inside the spectrogram.player tilde external. If I don't have a selection rectangle, then it's going to loop based on the drawn selections. So this is pretty cool, having a dynamic spectral bandpass linked to a player with variable speed, loop directions, and so on. There's a bunch more in the external, but as you can see, it's got a 0-1 SF play style message for start and stop. You can control the position, the playback position, you can control the speed, and you can loop, and you can do spectral bandpass. It also has an MCS variant, so just with MCS dot, spectral.player tilde. Now it's the same functionality, except it's going to take a multi-channel buffer and send it out of an MCS signal. So here I have I think it's a 6-channel that I'm mixing down to stereo. Oh, let me, had to toggle the DAC for the multi-channel signal to render all of the channels. So you guys can play around with this. Right now we're viewing all the channels. Let me turn off the filter for a second. We can also view one channel at a time. And this is an 8-channel file. So multi-channel output. You can also use it unlinked. So there is the most convenient way to use this is to link the right outlet of the spectrogram.player tilde external, which is the link output, to the input of the spectrogram tilde. I use the right input here. And once it links, it will reference that buffer and dynamically gather all of the information about the bandpass information and be able to render the loop points and the playback and so on. By the way, the playback as well is something that you can use your mouse to modify the playhead, and you can turn on and off the playhead. But when it's not linked, it still can be used as basically a groove tilde-like object. So just like I was doing before, it's got a second and a third inlet for loop start and loop end. We can use the spectrogram bandpass, spectrogram.bandpass abstraction that existed in the previous version for the frequency domain bandpass and have the same functionality or very similar functionality. So let me demo that for a second. So it's not rendering visually. It is doing the playback position because I've modified the patch to dynamically update that. And you can unlock this patch and examine it. So we can still play it unlinked. Also, it has a sync a second outlet, which is a sync outlet modeled on Groove Tilde, which you can use to dynamically control other MSP externals like the Wave Tilde external to sample accurately synchronize multiple channels and so on. So here's a very simple example, also unsynced, where I am playing out of the spectrogram tilde player and also syncing another external that's referencing the same buffer but referencing the second channel of it. So let's see, what else do we have? There's also, the snippets are updated. Let me open a new patch real quick and go to spectrogram, and you can look at all of these, but there's a spectrogram.player starter. Put that in here. And it's just a slightly simplified version of what you get in the help patch. And let's
E E A R R O R U U.
so there it is. And if we want to add more, okay, so you guys get the point. So new external, all the reference documentation is updated. You've got snippets, help patches, and this fills out the functionality pretty nicely. Now you can edit and control playback, do dynamic spectral bandpass filtering, render to new buffers, and there's a bunch more detailed in the changelog, but those are the main fun new additions to this package. So I hope you enjoy.